Awesome. So welcome everyone to Leading with Empathy and Allyship. Here we have deep, real conversations about how we can be more inclusive leaders in our workplaces and our communities. And I'm Melinda Briana Epler, your host and the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst, where we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, and events. This is a safe space to learn, to build empathy for each other, and to understand the tangible actions that we can all take to make a difference in the world. So we have been on air for 1 year, everyone. As of tomorrow, our audience has been steadily growing. We're excited to see you all tune in each week and listen to the podcast. And a year ago on our first episode, I spoke with Michelle Kim about countering anti-Asian xenophobia in the workplace a year ago. It was a few months into the pandemic and anti-Asian hate and violence was growing. And here we are 1 year later, still talking about this as it grows and anti-Asian racism continues. So fortunately, there are more allies getting behind this now. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited to talk to Tito today about influencing your company to address racism. Tito is Senior Solutions Engineer at Gladly. Welcome, Tito.
Good to be back, and happy anniversary, Melinda. That's quite a feat. It's so good to have something out there consistent, for the more marginalized groups to have access to.
Yeah. Hopefully, it's creating change. We're definitely seeing a lot of people tune in from around the world. So yeah. So Tito, the first thing we started doing is just describing ourselves for anybody who is blind, low vision, on the phone, on the podcast, who can't see us. So if you'll join me in that, I'll start. I'm a white woman with long hair, wearing a red shirt and black and white glasses.
Thank you for making this accessible for everyone and giving great thought into this. I'm Tito. I am Asian American, short black hair, V-neck black shirt, and no glasses.
Awesome. Cool. So a few things before we jump into conversation. One is, please, thank you all for starting to introduce yourselves. Please use the chat. Let us know what you're thinking about. Let us know who you are, where you are. Let us know what you're thinking about. Anything you want to say in the chat, please feel free to do so, obviously inclusively. And if you have specific questions, use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen, just so we can find them more easily. This is being live captioned by Maggie at White Coat Captioning. So down at the bottom of your screen, just click on closed caption and you'll be able to adjust the settings there if you like. And then we also have interpreters, sponsored by Interpreter Now, ASL Interpreters. So they will be taking turns on screen today. Also, thank you to our team, Juliet, Renzo, Sally, Araya, Emily, and Darlene, who are all doing things behind the scenes to make this make this magic happen. So today we're going to be talking about Tito's experience helping people in leadership and across the company to understand the issues and influencing them to take action. We'll talk a little bit about the issues, but if you want to know more, if you want to go deeper into the issues that are happening now around anti-Asian hate, please listen to episode 37. We talked about how we can collectively address anti-Asian hate with Tammy Cho. Lots of details there. In this episode, we're going to get more into the tactical and the practical and ways that you can make a difference and create change. So let's start, Tito, with a bit about your story and how you came to do the work that you do.
Yeah, so as Melinda mentioned, I'm a senior solutions engineer. Most people don't know what that is. And to be quite honest, I didn't know what it was when I applied for the position about 10 years ago. So how I actually got started is I was a tech support person in a startup, and part of my passion is really helping people and solving problems. So tech support, and I have a passion for technology. So, bridging those two things, tech support sounded like a great option for me. And I actually really loved it. But after 3 years of sitting behind a screen and people being really upset at you, because they're coming at you when they're already frustrated. I needed something a little bit more in terms of being able to solve problems, but also being able to help customers that aren't already upset. And so there was a position that was open in that company called a junior solutions engineer. Had no idea what it was, but just went for it anyways. And that's how I got my foot in the door. And I learned very quickly it was exactly what I wanted to do, to have the interactions, to build relationships, but also to have the technical chops to be able to help solve problems for customers. So that's how I got started, and been doing that for the last 10 years or so. And now I'm at Gladly today.
Awesome. Awesome. Let me dive into a couple of things. One is you gave a talk at Tech Inclusion last year about being a triple minority. And can you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, essentially, first, thank you for the invitation for that presentation. It was really important to me to kind of highlight, what that means and the experiences of a triple minority, or even, any minority. In my case, my definition of a triple minority and how I present is I'm a masculine person of center. In the world, I am a woman, but I present masculine. I'm Asian, and I'm also queer. And so I fall into those three major buckets, and the experiences that a triple minority has is vastly different, I think, from maybe someone that is not, maybe someone that is white presenting or cis presenting. And so it's important to have that conversation with you, a few months ago.
Yeah, and how is that playing out for you now? That experience playing out for you in this moment?
I'm not gonna lie, it's been really hard. It's hard, but it's also rewarding in the sense that the world at a macro seems a little bit more aggressive and violent, specifically around minorities and Asian hate or anti-Asians lately. The plus side to that of being a triple minority is I feel that because of the experiences that I've had, I've learned empathy and understanding. I've also had the privilege of experiencing support from folks that I never would think, white cis presenting males at work. They are probably the loudest speakers on my behalf, and that has been huge, and it's really heartwarming. But in terms of the world itself, it's a little scary. To give you some background, Melinda, I'm normally from the Bay Area, and I'm cross country traveling right now. And one of the concerns as I was planning this trip is not only my presentation in terms of gender, but now with this rhetoric of, Kung flu and all that anti-Asian language and violence, I now have to think further of what's safe. When can I go to the bathroom? Who do I need to bring with me? My partner actually had to be the face of our communication throughout our entire trip, especially in the South, because it hasn't been safe. Even during this trip, I've already got looks in the bathroom because of presentation, but also exiting a gas station. There was a man in the South. We'll just keep it at that. And he said some things under his breath, and he thought I couldn't hear him, but I actually I heard what he said, and it wasn't really kind, and it had to do with my ethnicity. So it's been hard because these are the things that are getting brought up to life, and people are more, I would say, they think they have permission to behave this way. So it's been challenging in that sense lately, more so than it has before. Growing up Asian, you always get these types of comments, but it hasn't felt threatening physically up until lately.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And yeah, I understand a bit about that, just that experience of having, my husband is Black, and there are times where we don't feel safe. And there are times when I have to be the one that's that presenting person of our couple. It sucks.
It's hard, but the allyship that you and others bring forward helps us stay safe. My partner is white presenting. She's actually Jewish, but she's white presenting. And I think if it wasn't for her, it sounds funny, but I probably wouldn't be going to the bathroom, to be honest. Not by myself, that wouldn't happen.
So I want to point out to everybody that when you described your role, it had nothing to do with diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah.
That is not your role in the company. Having said that, can we talk a little bit about what you have done inside your company over the last, has it been a couple months?
Yeah. First, I want to acknowledge Black Lives Matter. Because we're having this conversation, I definitely want this to stay in the forefront in parallel with other things that we're talking about. Secondly, I absolutely did not do this alone. I've just been lucky to be able to connect with you, Melinda, and having this conversation. But there were a whole bunch of people at Gladly that had very strong voices, thoughts, and insights into how we got the company going forward to help support anti-racism. That being said, the most important thing that I've learned is there has to be intent. And we're really lucky at Gladly that there's leadership intent in making things better and easier. The question there, what was hard for me, so just to give some context, we all know that there's a lot of anti-Asian kind of violence happening, and that has gotten worse and worse. And a lot of my colleagues and myself started to see more of these reports happening. And we took it really personally because any one of these people could have been our moms, aunts, sisters. I've had colleagues that are of Asian ethnicity that were scared to leave their house for the first time ever. And so there's a dedicated Slack channel at Gladly about DEI. And it started off just really, sharing stories and diversity hiring. That's actually one of our goals. It's something that we were very focused on. But that quickly turned into focus on the anti-Asian hate and also Black Lives Matter leading before this. And our C-suite, our CEO, our co-founders, they're very active in understanding what's happening and how they can better support us. And so there's a lot of support between or about Black Lives Matter, and I'm so grateful for that. The second part, and to be really honest, was, and this is not Gladly specific, just generally speaking, the lack of outcry when it came to anti-Asian hate. That was really hard and frustrating. And there were a handful of us at Gladly that would just converse with each other in this kind of public DEI channel, talking about how much it hurts, how scary it is, how it could have been our families. And that led into our VP of people leaning in and saying, okay, what can we do to help? We had allies also start to speak up, which always kind of, tugs at my heart. And it's because the collaborative voices that was brought up to the surface that we were able to take the first step. So from that Slack conversation, we're able to dedicate an entire company meeting sharing our individual stories, and we were able to humanize that experience. I think there were about 3 or 4 of us that shared our stories to the company of 120 people, really just, pulling from the heart. And I think we were able to humanize the process, which started huge conversations within Gladly. And from there, we're able to get resources, donations to different organizations, different training groups are now in conversations. And so we've been doing a lot. And that's kind of how that all started.
Awesome. Can you kind of walk through like the steps that for somebody who, because, I think there are a lot of people in companies right now feeling like frustrated, angry, and like their companies aren't doing enough. And so I think over the last year, I've seen when George Floyd was murdered, and so much of Black people having to push for their companies to do something, and Asian people now as well, and I think it would be helpful for people to learn more about exactly how you did it. What did you do? How did you make it happen?
Yeah, I will say it was definitely ad hoc and not planned, and it was just really ebb and flow. Again, I can't reiterate enough that I sit in a privileged place in terms of working for a company that has every intention to support minorities and people of color. That in itself made it easy for us to start this conversation with Gladly. So I can only speak from that lens. But just because, so the first step was literally sharing stories and humanizing the process. So when I say sharing stories, I mean it in twofold. One is sharing stories of what's in the media now, the brutality of it, and kind of making it real. Then pairing that up with the reality that my mom texts me every night to make sure that I got home okay, meaning, are you alive and okay? You know, things like humanizing it. My mom could be going for a walk and she could have been one of those women that got beaten down. And I think being authentic in that approach. So the first step was bringing stories to light. Second was humanizing the process. And also there was another colleague of mine that was having back end conversations with management on our behalf. So there's some of us that were having front facing kind of, hey, in Slack channel, this is what's happening. There's another colleague that took it upon herself to talk to management to say, hey, we really, really need to do something about this. Go check out all of these things in the Slack channel. Got it on their attention, and then basically just asked, actually, I don't even think we asked for the hour meeting. It was given to us by management because they wanted to hear from us. That all goes to show that companies' intent is really important. I can't speak for companies that don't have it on their radar or might not want or might not care. But I can say if the company really wants to hear, they just might need some guidance in understanding what's happening now. Kind of coming from a growth mindset, people want to help, and you have to assume that they want to help. And though it takes some labor, and I have internal struggles with this as well, sometimes it does take the emotional labor to bring it to light first and foremost. So that's kind of the first initial approach. And then just dedicating time or asking for time to speak, I think is the next step. And then you can't go into a conversation sharing without potential solutions. At least that's my take on it.
I agree.
Yeah, so you can't go in and just say, oh my God, everything is awful, and then not have any suggestions of how to ask for help. My theory is, oh, everything is awful, but this is what I need. And so there's a lot of resources that were shared organically internally in the Slack channel that we brought up to the entire company. These are training organizations that you can be a part of. These are organizations that can use donations. Here are news articles that you can post. The question always comes up, what can your company do? We have some great examples of resources, and also ask yourself, who's at the table? What representation is here?
Yeah. So given that, what should companies be doing now? What are some good solutions for companies to be, what are some good things for companies to be doing right now in this moment?
In terms of anti-racism, literally ask people how they're doing first and foremost. I can only speak from an Asian background, but also any minority group should ask how they're doing first and foremost. As an Asian, we were raised to be quiet and not cause trouble or cause issue. Keep your head down, do your work, and don't cause any trouble. With that, it becomes ingrained in us to not say anything, even if it's painful. And so some people might just be bearing the pain or the fear or the anxiety. And if you don't ask, you don't know. And so a lot of people want to be allies and they think they have all the answers, and that's okay if you don't. Ask how you can help. It's different for each person, quite frankly. For me, what's helpful is hearing outcry, outrage. The donation part is secondary for me. My colleague who might be Asian, maybe donations for organizations might be a priority for her or him. So I think really asking, literally, how can I help? Are you okay? I think I think that's fair to ask, and what companies can start doing. And also dedicate time to lift up these minority voices. We kind of go about our way, day to day, and we don't really think about what voices aren't heard, who's not at the table, and who needs to be heard. The quiet one, what do you have to say? I think everyone has something to offer, but sometimes you just kind of need to pull it from them a little bit.
Yeah. Actually, can you talk a little bit more about, you said you want, in addition to that, you want to see outcry and outrage from your allies. Is that what you mean?
I do. For me personally, I don't know, and this might not resonate with others, but for me, if there's empathy and sympathy into the things that are happening, that is so impactful, because I feel from empathy and sympathy comes action, right? It's easy to throw money at things, that, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Don't get me wrong. For me personally, though, if your actions are driven by empathy and sympathy, that is huge, because it's authentic and it's important. It's just really important, especially with white presenting folks, and having those voices lift up the minority voices. I'll give you a really great example. There was a period in time where in Slack channel, I was sharing a lot of stories, and this is no fault of anyone's. I was just really frustrated that there wasn't outcry and there wasn't attention to this particular story about, anti-Asian violence. And we had a colleague of mine who is white presenting cis male. He just reposted what I posted and just said, hey, listen to this. He used his privilege to uplift my voice, and it got the traction needed. So we can sit here and just have ego conversation about, well, why didn't anybody listen to me? Why did they listen when he posted? To me, it doesn't matter so long as the voice is heard. And I am so grateful that he used his privilege to uplift our voice. It's a huge reason why we were able to have the hour-long meetings at Gladly about this, because he was able to help just bring that to the forefront.
And that gets to another question I had around what do you wish leadership had done to begin with?
It's hard, because I think they've done such a great job to date. I've always felt supported. If I'm being really, really transparent and kind of getting into the weeds of things, I wish it didn't take a long time, but I just wished maybe after the first posting of the story, someone would have reached out and said, hey, is there anything we can do? Part of that is my own impatience too, though. When I see something that's not right, whether it's anti-Asian, BLM, or, I don't know, an old woman walking across the street, no one's helping. Like, I am, I like quick action when it comes to helping others. And so maybe my expectations aren't realistic in terms of, hey, this thing is happening, give me the attention I need. But if I could have changed it, that would probably be the only thing I would change, is getting support a little bit sooner. I will caveat and say, Gladly did not take a long time. I'm just impatient.
Yeah, well, I think that you're not alone in being impatient and people wanting to see brands, companies, people step up and say something and do something right away. So
it's hard though, right? Because if you're coming from a growth mindset, again, we have expectations in what we want, but sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what you need if you don't bring it up. And I can tell you, as soon as we brought it up, hey, we want our CEO to post something about this, immediately it happened. So it's one of those things where we have to understand and come from a growth mindset. Yes, this is the thing that I want, but if they don't know and they don't have the guidance, it would be helpful to just ask for what you need specifically, versus just sitting there brooding, being angry that something is not happening. That leads into the emotional labor part in my mind. But again, I have personal internal struggles with emotional labor. My emotional labor struggle comes it's an internal fight between what is needed and my ego. So how can people help me if they don't understand? So it takes my labor to help educate. At the same time, Melinda, and we'll be really honest with you, the past 2 weeks I've been really tired. So I went into this burst into our company Slack channel, and then I just went quiet. I was just so tired, and I wasn't mad. I was just exhausted. I was re-traumatizing myself, posting these stories and explaining things and sharing stories, which is all necessary, but I was literally spent. I mean, not even just spent in the Slack channel. I went to bed every night at like 7 or 8 because I was exhausted. So it's an internal struggle for me in terms of emotional labor versus my ego saying, hey, you should already know and don't count on me to help educate you. I see a need for it sometimes, I also very much see the reality of being exhausted by it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when we retell stories, our own stories too, we're also going through that re-traumatizing every single time. And I think people sometimes don't understand that it just like, it is not healthy, and you have to re-energize, you have to refocus, you have to recharge, and work through that trauma each time.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be a concept. If we can have this conversation, if we're having this conversation about emotional labor and trauma, it's not just this concept. For any minority out there listening, we have to relive the fact that people call us gooks and all these derogatory terms since childhood, and we have to relive that to tell these stories so people understand and can humanize the struggles or the traumas that we're going through. It's really exhausting. And so if I hadn't asked it, it would just I would just hope that people understood that it's not just this term trauma and just using that loosely. Literally, we're reliving crap by having to retell these stories, and it's hard. I also understand that it's necessary sometimes.
Yeah, and then we talked, I think it was last season with Andrea Tatum about the emotional attacks that people of color face in the workplace. The microaggressions and all
Yeah.
the discrimination that you face in the workplace, and then on top of it, you're adding this emotional labor of educating people, and then of course you have your work. Your actual the work on top of it, and it is a lot. It is a lot.
It's hard to compartmentalize too, especially the past couple of weeks, being just really exhausted and also trying to do my best at my actual job. Um, yeah, and I try not to bring it up much. Again, this is maybe a cultural thing. Stay silent, put your head down, keep going. But taking this opportunity to absolutely acknowledge that it's been very exhausting.
Yeah. We're going to jump to Q&A not too long from now. So if you all have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function. I'm noticing a comment from Shelley. It's the difference between ask culture and guest culture, which I think is interesting. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that just hits home. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot. Oh,
I love it.
There's a question there. Sorry. Oh, no, there's not. Yeah, I think that's right, though. A lot of people, just thinking back about the experience I had at Gladly, what they did really well was ask instead of guess. They asked us what we need. We asked for the time to share our stories. They asked us, what can I do to help? We shared resources and organizations. We talked about DEI training. Actually, our VP of people, she actually deemed it DEEI. So it's diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion. And I think that was really important. And then it is actually frustrating when people guess in terms of what we might need. And now there's the labor to correct that or course correct, to get people to actually meet the needs that we're asking for. So that was actually a really good point to, I think, was that Shelley that pointed that out. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any ideas for how we can change this so that the heavy labor, the emotional labor, isn't always on people who are experiencing racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, and other discrimination?
Yeah, if I had a
Yeah.
magic formula, I was just like, can't people just be more aware and empathetic? That would solve the problem. But we know that that's not the case for everyone because we all wear different lenses and different hats. That's a really good question because it goes back to we have to give the emotional labor to
Mhm.
explain, empathy or just asking questions. I think that's a good start, though. Ask questions from a place where you're not guessing what we want. How can I help? Are there resources? And maybe try doing the research yourself before asking us the question. I think that's pretty key and a really good kind of baseline. If you're curious about something before asking, Google's awesome. The internet is huge. awesome, go research, and then, come back and maybe check with us. Is this the right path? Is this what you need? This is what I've read. That would be really helpful.
Awesome. And Gina says in the comments, use allies to answer the standard painful questions. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Allies should be able to do that, no problem. And if you, and allies look it up so that you can do that, right?
And we've had some of those experiences within the company that I work for now. I have to say, it strikes me. It just tugs at my heartstrings when that happens, because sometimes as a minority, you feel like you're kind of alone on this island. And yes, you have other people of color supporting you. But then when there is an educated and curious white cis presenting person that steps up and just says, hey, look, here are the resources that I found. What do you think? Amazing. We've had that at Gladly. And a lot of the resources that I sent you in prep for this podcast came from colleagues that are not of the minority demographic. And it's been amazing. And I am thinking of two people in particular that I just am so grateful for.
Awesome. So I do have another question around, looking back, is there anything that you would do differently? Is there anything that you would do is there anything you would do differently to kind of push the company forward?
I think I could have helped support my colleague in having the internal conversation with C-level executives. I feel that she took the really heavy lifting, and she did it without taking credit. She just saw what was needed. And that's where I could practice the asking versus guessing. I just assumed everything was fine. But in retrospect, when I think back about it, there's probably a lot of lifting that she had to do, navigating conversations. I could have helped her maybe and backed her up a little bit more to get the ball rolling sooner. That's the only thing I would really change in terms of Gladly and addressing anti-racism. Again, it's more because I'm impatient. I want things to happen and change to happen immediately. But I think I could have helped. One, I could have helped her with direct conversations with, on the back end. I think I could have also helped highlight other minority voices in the company that are a little bit more silent. The reputation, I think, at Gladly is I'm pretty vocal about this stuff, but I want others to have an opportunity too. And I think I could have done that to help move the ball along also.
Can you say a little bit more about that? What do you mean?
I think there are minority groups that this goes back to the guest culture. I think that there are sometimes voices that want to be heard that aren't necessarily heard. And because I'm one of the more vocal people within the company, I could reach out to them directly to see, one, how they're doing, two, if there's anything that they want to bring to light and help facilitate that conversation, or at least get that on the radar so they're heard, or so their voices are heard and their needs and worries and anxieties are also heard. And I think that would be helpful in terms of the levity of what's happening and how that affects our colleagues and our friends.
Yeah, so you be an ally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And any tips for, I know you said it kind of happened ad hoc, but any tips for, I think it's really important that that people don't do this work alone, that you build that coalition. Any tips for how to do that?
Oh yeah, there's no way that anybody could do this alone, I don't think. And
Yeah.
again, I get to be the face of this conversation, but I can tell you that I had a ton of colleagues that built a coalition. I think it starts with, hey, let's get together first, share the frustration, get it out of our system. Next, have a plan to action. First safe place, dump it all out. Now, what do we want from it? Again, going in not with, oh my God, the world is awful and that's it, but the world is awful. What do we want and what do we need? Coming together, making that plan. And that's exactly what we did organically. There's a few of us that started, shared our story, came together, and then expanded that to the DEI channel, and then was able to build that coalition just by personalizing and humanizing the experiences.
Awesome. If y'all have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I see a hand raised. If you want to put your question in the Q&A, if you have a question, please do. Tito, what are next steps? What will you do from here, if anything?
Yeah, so a colleague of mine shared some training resources, which I think is super valuable. So we think about organizations and how we can donate, but there's nothing that really changes behavior until you start understanding experiences and going through training. And so a colleague of mine shared some resources in terms of training, and what we're doing as a company is we're taking a look at these training courses and implementing that into kind of our culture. And for us, I think that's the next step. And I'm so thrilled about it. Quite frankly, it didn't come to mind. All I thought was, I need outrage, I need outcry, I need people, to understand this. But change does not happen until I think, actions take place above and beyond donations. And so this is where we're changing behavior with training courses. So I think that's the next thing for us. And I'd like to think that we're continuing these types of conversations within Gladly. And I am confident that anything that comes up, whether it's BLM, anti-Asian hate, or whatever it may be, that we have that platform to continue conversations internally.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the training and kind of helping people to put things into practice is really important. We have a question asking if the training courses, are the training courses on LinkedIn? Oh, I see. There are some training courses on LinkedIn.
And I think and I think I sent you the link. There's something, and I think Jessica's on a call. He's a colleague of mine. Hollaback. That's training courses that we are looking at, I believe. And there's a few other resources as well. In terms of LinkedIn, I don't have any personal insight on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did have some courses there.
Yeah, we've shared. There's Hollaback, and there's a couple of other organizations too that we shared when talking with Tammy Cho. So it's on our website now. If you just go to changecatalyst.co/allyship series, and under that episode, you'll see some more resources that we shared there too. I've taken a Hollaback course. I highly recommend it to everyone, not just in your workplace, but just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard great things, and I'm signed up for, I think the 23rd or something like that.
Awesome. We have a question from Angel asking if you feel comfortable. Can you share how your company responded during the unrest last summer? And I would say the Black Lives Matter movement, protests, murder of George Floyd.
It was high on our radar. It was directly addressed internally as a company. So every Friday we have company meetings, and it's usually kind of business related, product sales and things like that. But it was at that time we had direct discussions about BLM and also shared resources. And we also had a period in time in which we shared history of just, people of color in history and why this is important, not only George Floyd, but everything, leading up to that. And then I believe as a company, there were donations made as well in support of, BLM. But I can say the conversations were not a one-off. We continue to have these dedicated conversations, and resources were shared throughout the company. Not sure if that was helpful, but we absolutely did address it in a way that made me feel that, we care, and it's absolutely always on our radar.
Yeah, and I mean, I think maybe that is if there's a pattern in companies of that emotional labor having to happen when any kind of an incident occurs, then I think that that's something that as a company and as leaders in a company, you need to kind of reflect on that. Okay, how can we change that so that doesn't happen every single time, that the emotional labor doesn't have to happen in that same way. I think that is an important piece of this.
And that's what felt really great at that time. there was proactiveness in leadership, saying, okay, this is a thing that's happening. We're going to address it, not only from a kind of a donation support perspective, but we're going to address it internally in our own culture to make sure that everyone understands our stance on it and how we can help our own culture in facilitating support for BLM.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We actually have a comment from a colleague, I think. Jessica says, please thank Tito for her vulnerability. As her coworker, she is an amazing advocate for all BIPOC and underrepresented groups. She makes us proud every day.
Well, thanks, Jessica. I will say, since she put me on the spot, she is absolutely crucial to our company's conversations in anti-racism. And we could not have gotten the support that we had in the time that we had without her. So thank you, Jessica.
Awesome. If anybody else has questions, I'll just give you a few more moments to put them in the Q&A while I ask my last question here, which is just a general question. You've been traveling for how long?
Oh, since mid-December.
And what have you been doing in your travels, and what have you learned?
Yeah, so traveling from San Francisco, I'm currently sitting in DC. So we stopped in Texas, drove through Alabama, stopped in New Orleans, stayed in North Carolina for a month, stayed in Florida for 2 months, and now in Washington, DC. I'll fast forward to what I really absolutely loved. So we were visiting my partner's family in Florida. I love Florida because of her family. Would I move there? Probably not. North Carolina's been great. I love the mountains there. We were in the more diverse Asheville area and also a little town called Brevard. And DC, I have to tell you, DC is really underrated. Politics aside, the culture here, the people, the diversity has been so wonderful. So what have I learned? I love DC. They don't believe in garages. Alabama has a lot of camouflage, which is fine. Florida is very muggy and has weird rain weather. And North Carolina has great hiking.
And where are you going next?
We are going to head to Cape Cod next.
Oh, nice.
And then Maine, and then probably head back west. That part of the trip hasn't been planned out yet. But yeah, 2 of us and our dogs.
Awesome. Okay, we have some more questions here. Shireen asks if your company participates in implicit bias training or unconscious bias training.
We do. We absolutely do. That's been there before I even joined. So we do have some training. If you need resources on that, I'm more than happy to ask our head of people about the training courses that we've taken, and more than happy to share that.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can sync after this and put it on our website. Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. We have, let's see, just reading through the questions here. How to measure the success so Kofi asks, how to measure success or progress of change within your organization, as well as the country in general. That's a big question. Maybe what does success look like to you? We've put a lot of effort and time into these conversations and addressing these challenges. How do you measure the impact and changes that these conversations have?
I think I measure impact, and this might be different for others, by the level of conversations had and the empathy and sympathy that and curiosity that comes from those conversations. For me, that's a measure of success. If people are continuously asking and are continuously curious and continuously sharing, for me, that's a measure of success. Globally, I mean, that's a hard question when people stop beating each other up and being violent to one another and using language that isn't supportive. Maybe that's kind of, when we can see the measure of success globally, which it feels far away, to be honest. But in terms of just my micro world, I think, to reiterate, if conversations continue to happen and there's empathy involved and curiosity involved, that would be my own personal measure of success.
Awesome. Yeah, we do have to remember, like you said earlier, that it does take time, that behavior change takes time, that building empathy sometimes takes time as well. Yeah, it's we also need a critical mass of allies to really be there and step up and know how to do that effectively as well.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I'm going through this experience of having allyship now, in terms of white cis presenting folks. So it's still, to be quite frank, new to me, a new experience, but I can tell you it means so, so much. To this day, if I see a post somewhere from a colleague, in support or sharing resources that's not of the minority group, it is huge because it's coming from a place of, again, curiosity and care. And if anybody, if there's one important thing to help, your minority demographic, it would be to be curious and elevate voices on their behalf.
Awesome. Heidi asks, if you feel comfortable, how would you keep the conversations alive over time? We've had wonderful safe space conversations, discussions, and match donations, but don't know how to extend the conversation past regular and to becoming a regular ongoing conversations. And then the secondary question is, we're a global company, so wondering how to include people globally in the conversations, if you have any thoughts.
Ooh, that's a good one. In terms of keeping the conversation going, I can only give you my experience. So I mentioned there was a time when I had a lull because I was just exhausted emotionally and I just kind of was quiet. Today, I peppered another kind of article, again, with the recent things that are happening in Minnesota. So peppered that up there. And I think just, again, it comes back to the emotional labor. I have such a struggle with that. But if it's silent and things are happening, someone has to bring it up. And so if that has to be you, even if it's something as simple as posting a link to an article or, hey, did you hear about this, to start the conversation going, as much as I hate to say it, like sometimes that's necessary. Again, if we come at it with a growth mindset, people don't know. And if you are aware, you can share that awareness to keep that conversation going. Ask people what they think of what's happening. Did you know this thing was happening? What are your thoughts? Things like that. I think that continues to get the ball rolling with the conversation. It is exhausting and it does take time, but I think it's necessary. From a global perspective, that's a really interesting question. I can't say I have any insight there just because cultures are very different around the world. And I don't know how to best approach that, to be really honest. Just culturally, some things are more important than others. And, the objective is to have the most efficient and meaningful conversation that you can. But then you have to understand also, how does each culture approach a specific topic?
Yeah. Jessica says, we've heard that what helped our white colleagues better understand the reach and reality of racism is hearing the lived experiences with racism of our BIPOC coworkers. Tito, would you share more about your experience or stories?
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, I think you're talking about the stories that we shared with our colleagues. I think it goes back to humanizing the process. So what I shared with the company, and we had several people share, was I was, and I still am, very worried about the safety of my mom, given that everyone's been really brazen with the attacks. And I'm really close to my mom. I'm an only child, a mother of an immigrant. She's the only family I have here, and my father passed away when I was younger. So really, she's all the family I have. And so if anything were to happen to her, I don't think I'd be okay, to be honest. And I worry about her all the time. Uh, she likes to go for walks in the park, and I always ask her to text me when she gets home to make sure she's okay. And she's in Southern California. But to have this anxiety and this worry constantly, that the reality that someone can go to her and just either punch her in the face or take a pipe to her head is real. Sounds dramatic, but that is what has been happening. And so it's been hard to balance the anxiety and also my real work and also the emotional labor that is required to continue these conversations all in any single second of the day. That is just what goes on in my body and my mind. And if you think about it, most folks don't have to worry about, hey, is my mom safe going for a walk? Is someone going to hit her over the head with, a brick?
Yeah.
But I'm constantly thinking about it. And it's hard being really far from her too. That's just kind of the cliff notes of what I shared in the company. But I will say it's very real. We're having these talks, and I appreciate them very much. I just want to reiterate that the fear and anxiety about anti-racism or just racism is really real, and it affects your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. What do you do to take care of yourself?
What do I do to take care? I've been taking baths lately.
Mm.
But on the other side too, I've had to give myself boundaries not to re-traumatize myself in reading articles. So just setting boundaries for myself and giving myself permission to sit down and actually not actively look at articles. And I'm starting to try meditation again, and doing a little yoga too, and really just having conversations also with my partner at home. She's been a really good resource for me in taking the weight of kind of the anxiety and things that I have. She gives me a safe place to just kind of break down and dump it all after a long day. And going for walks. That's kind of been what's helpful.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I highly recommend continuing meditation. I have meditated every day for several years, and it makes a big difference for me. Thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing your story, for sharing your experiences. Really appreciate this.
Thank you for, again, the platform, and thank you for your entire team for making this accessible, and just creating such a great platform. It is absolutely valuable and appreciated.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for continuing to do the work of change, for listening in. And my question to you today is, what will you do? How will you take a moment as an ally to share what's happening? How will you share that you are, what Tito said, outrage? How will you share your own outcry and outrage? I think that is really important. So join us each week, and please share this with your colleagues. You can find all the previous podcast episodes at changecatalyst.co/allyship series. And we'll, when the podcast goes live, we'll share resources on our website there as well, additional resources where you can tune in to continue to learn. And please find this on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, and like it, subscribe it, and help us grow our audience. Thank you all, and see you next week.